everyone, it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I want to feature a Simon Says stamp set called Some Bunny Special, and I'm going to be using 3 different mediums to color in this image and the elements around it. Now, this is a really fun way that I like to be able to use my coloring mediums and be able to use them to create the effects that I want. Here's a look at the stamp set that I'll be using today. This is the Some Bunny Special stamp set. One of my favorites in this set is the little bunny with his eyes covered, and the sentiment, "Wake me up when it's spring," is perfect for him. That sentiment in the bunny was actually inspired by Stephanie Lykoff. She is the marketing director over at Simon Says Stamp, and she mentioned to me when I designed this stamp set that she thought that would be really fun to incorporate into this set. So a big shout out to her for her creative inspiration on this particular stamp set. So I'm going to go ahead and line up these images into my MISTI stamping tool. The first thing I need to do is I need to figure out the placement of the mailbox and the bunny because I'm going to be doing some masking. And so I need to make sure I know where each element is going to be placed. That way as I do my stamping step by step here, I will have them all in the exact place that I need them. So I'm going to stamp the bunny first, and he's standing on a little flower pot. I'm using some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink to go ahead and stamp this. Now before I clean off my stamp, I'm going to actually stamp this also onto a piece of Post-it tape, and that's so that way I can cut this out and make it into a mask, so that way I can continue doing my stamping to create my scene. I'm cutting out the Post-it tape mask with some fine tip scissors. These are Cutter Bee scissors. I like using these for thinner papers. For thicker papers, I like using the Tim Holtz mini snips. I'm going to go ahead and lay that mask over top of my bunny, and then I can continue stamping the rest of my images. My next image is the little envelope, so that way he's looking like he's putting the envelope into the mailbox. I'm going to ink that up and press that down right over top of the bunny. That way it's going to look like he's holding the envelope in his hand. I also cut out an envelope mask using that same Post-it tape, and this time I'm going to now take the mailbox and stamp this down onto my panel as well. After stamping the mailbox, I took some of the little supporting elements and added these onto my scene. I stamped the hair bow, the little grassy areas, so that way I can continue adding the scene outside of the area between the bunny and the mailbox. I'm also stamping the carrots. I masked off the grass using some Post-it tape, and I'm stamping the carrots so that way they look like they're poking up out of the ground. After adding in all of my images, I'm going to start working on my coloring. So for coloring these images, I want to combine my Copic markers and my Prismacolor colored pencils to create some really cool shading effects. So what I'm doing is I'm first starting off by adding a single layer of color onto each of the areas of the scene. I'll have all the colors that I used listed over at the blog, so go ahead and check that out. The link is in the video description. After I've added in all of the coloring of the base layers, it's time to work on my colored pencil coloring. For this, I'm using my Prismacolor colored pencils. And I want to point out that when you're coloring with colored pencils, you want to make sure that you have a nice sharp point on your pencils. I like using the Prismacolor pencil sharpener. I get great results with this and don't have any of the pencils break. After I've gone ahead and sharpened my pencils, I'm going to continue working on adding some shading. This is going to build up depth and dimension to my images and give them a more realistic look. So I'm going to let you finish watching the coloring here. It's going to take about a minute, and then I'll go ahead and be back when I go ahead to finish working on the rest of this card. Okay, so now that I finished my coloring, I'm taking a black Prismacolor multi-liner pen, and I'm going around and outlining all of the images here. That's going to make sure that the black outline of these stamped images are really nice and bold. After doing that, I wanted to trim down this panel so that way it looks like it's been die cut. So I'm using some fine tip scissors and also my Fiskars fingertip control cutting blade. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the middle area with the cutting blade, and then I cut around the outside areas of the image with the fine tip scissors. After doing the cutting, I'm taking some watercolor markers. These are the Zig Clean Color watercolor markers. and I'm using these to create the background. Because I wanted to be able to combine the different mediums that I have in my stash, this allows me to create different effects. So by doing the Copic coloring and the pencil coloring on the images, that allows me to get really intense detail. But then the watercolor allows me to get a really cool faded background color for the sky. And I think that really is fun to be able to combine these mediums together to get the different effects that you want for your card. You don't have to use a single medium on one card. Now, while I was talking, I went ahead and started lining up some of the sentiments from the Somebody Special stamp set. I'm stamping the supporting sentiment here with some soft granite ink from Hero Arts. I actually stamped that twice just to get it a little bit darker. Then for the word bunny, I'm going to use, first here I used hollyhock, but I decided I didn't want the pink and I wanted red instead to bring out the red in the mailbox. So I went ahead and re-stamped that with some lipstick red ink from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to go ahead and pop up the little scene here off of my card using some foam tape. Go ahead and line that up along the bottom. Both of these panels have some stitching detail die cut into them using some Simon Says Stamp stitched rectangle dies. After adding that onto my card, I need to create the card base. So I'm using some Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and I'm cutting that down to an A2 size card. So it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I scored it with my Martha Stewart scoring board. After I've scored it, I went ahead and took it into my MISTI stamping tool. This is the large MISTI stamping tool. And I'm using a background stamp from My Favorite Things to add this really cool chevron background. I took out the foam piece that's in the middle of the MISTI so that way I can use the rubber cling stamp. After I've gone ahead and pressed that down really good, I stamped it with some Simon Says Stamp clear ink. It's an embossing ink. That gives me a nice tone-on-tone effect. Now, the panel that's behind my scene is cut using these eyelet stitch dies from Memory Box. I cut down this panel to be slightly larger than the panel that has my scene on it. And I cut around all the edges with that eyelet stitches die. And that creates this really cool scalloped eyelet effect. It looks really, really nice, especially layered behind my scene. I adhered that panel together onto my scene just using some regular adhesive. And then I put some fun foam on the back side of that entire piece and attached it down onto my card. For some additional elements, I used some Spectrum Noir clear glitter on some of the areas of this card. I also added some baker's twine along the top, and I even added a little bit of darker detailing to the eye just to give it a little bit more interest. So I hope that this card has inspired you to use your coloring mediums together to create some really cool, fantastic effects. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, or you can head on over to the blog to get more information on this card, including still pictures and products used. If you enjoyed this video, here are a couple more you might find interesting. Be sure to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can connect with us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, as well as our blog. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Bye!